We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA.
Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
Welcome back to Notify America. We have multiple pressing stories to get to. Stories that include Donald Trump getting railroaded in New York City this week as the judge decided on the final fine he chose to levy against the former president for allegedly overvaluing his properties. And it's big, folks. $364 million big. We have the details and Trump's reaction. Also, President Biden finds a new reason Americans should get behind sending our tax dollars over to Ukraine. We're going to look at it, and new polling out of Gallup shows Joe Biden would beat all presidential odds if he were to win with his current job approval numbers. Basically, he's in such a bad spot to run for re-election, it would be a miracle for him to win in November. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. A New York judge has found Donald Trump liable in his civil fraud case brought by Attorney General Letitia James, fining him $364 million for allegedly defrauding banks in order to acquire loans and other benefits, even though the banks themselves testified they were satisfied after doing their own due diligence. They were satisfied with Trump as a customer with the loans. Therefore, it's a victimless crime, like Trump has been saying. Along with the immense sum of money Trump now has to pay, Judge Engoron also barred him from serving as an officer or director of any New York corporation or other legal entity in the state for a period of 3 years. Both his sons were also barred for a period of 2 years. Now, before we look at Trump's response, just know this entire case, like almost all of these Trump cases, are politically motivated. The AG who brought the case campaigned on getting Trump. Watch this.
I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing him, defending your rights, and then going home.
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the
And the judge who oversaw the case, Judge Engoron, waived a jury trial, decided to make himself the sole decider, ruled against the former president every chance he got, not to mention came out before even seeing the evidence to say he believes Trump's guilty. Watch the former president respond to the court's verdict yesterday. Watch this.
Here he is coming out.
Let's go to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. We're hearing Trump speak right now. Let's take a listen.
For, in my opinion, the country, a New York State judge just ruled that he's crooked as you can get. And a lot of people expected something like this, but not for the amount. But this is a very dishonest man. This is a man that's been overturned already on this case 4 times. But a crooked New York State judge just ruled that I have to pay a fine of $355 million for having built a perfect company. Great cash, great buildings, great everything. It affects New York. It's mostly talking about New York, where we have a totally corrupt attorney general. She campaigned on the fact that I will get Trump, I will get Trump. Everybody's seen it. Letitia James, they've all seen it. Well, we'll be appealing, but more important than that, this is Russia, this is China, this is the same game. It all comes out of the DOJ, it all comes out of Biden. It's a witch hunt against his political opponent, the likes of which our country has never seen before. You see it in third world countries, banana republics, but you don't see it here. So I just want to say this. You build a great company. There was no fraud. The banks all got their money, 100%. They love Trump. They testified that Trump is great customer, one of our best customers. They testified beautifully. And the judge knows that. He's just a corrupt person. And we knew that from the beginning. We knew it right from the beginning because he wouldn't give it to the commercial division. This judge thought Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million, and it's worth anywhere from 50 to 100 times that amount. So we realized that. He ruled against me before he even got the case. He ruled against me. He said I was guilty. He didn't know what I was guilty of before he even got the case. And Letitia James, that's another case altogether. She's a horribly corrupt attorney general, and it's all having to do with election interference. There were no victims because the banks made a lot of money. They made $100 million. And by the way, I paid approximately $300 million in taxes as the migrants come in and they take over New York. I paid over this period of years over $300 million in taxes, and they want me out. Oh, let's see if we can get them out. These are radical left Democrats. They're lunatics, and it's election interfering. So I just want to thank you for being here. We'll appeal. We'll be successful, I think, because, frankly, if we're not successful, New York State is gone. People are moving out of New York State, and because of this, they're going to move out at a much faster rate. They used a statute. It's a consumer fraud statute that's never been used for a thing like this before. They used it on me because I'm running for president. I'm beating Biden by a lot. We're beating not only the Republicans, we're beating Biden by a lot. The poll came out today. We're up 20 points on Biden. If I weren't running, none of this stuff would have ever happened. None of these lawsuits would have ever happened. Nothing would. I would have had a nice life. But I enjoy this life for a different reason. We're going to make America great again. These are corrupt people. These are people that shouldn't be allowed to do the things they do. And they're using this as weaponization against a political opponent who's up a lot in the polls and always will be, because I'm competing with a man who can't put two sentences together, who doesn't know what he's doing. And we're heading into a third world war because of this guy. We have to win this election. They're doing everything possible to step in our way, but we're not going to stand for it. So thank you very much. We will get back to work. It's a ridiculous award. Listen, a fine of $355 million.
Okay, that was former President Donald Trump speaking outside in
President Joe Biden has the lowest job approval ratings for any incumbent president running for re-election, according to Gallup, who just released new polling data and a comprehensive summary of what his prospects would be in this 2024 election season. Out of all presidents, going back to Eisenhower in 1956, Joe Biden, they say, has the worst approval ratings of all of them. Take a look at this. Joe Biden currently has a 41% approval rating. Who those 41% of people are, I have no idea, as he doesn't actually do much for people to approve of. His calendar is virtually empty for the next month and for the previous month. He has like one White House event each week where he pops in front of the press and reads a few sentences from the teleprompter before shuffling back to the West Wing. So it's odd voters look at that with approval, but I don't know. Maybe they're just party line voters. What Gallup goes on to say in this summary is that presidents with approval ratings of 50% or higher close to Election Day have all been reelected. But only one time, one incumbent president has ever won re-election with an approval rating below 50%, that being George W. Bush, who managed to win with a 48% approval rating in Gallup's final 2004 poll. They go on to say Biden's 41% job approval rating is the lowest in history among incumbents for the month of January in an election year, and it would basically be a miracle for him to win without boosting his numbers in the coming months. Meanwhile, over at Real Clear Politics, when you look at the most recent general election polls, somehow Biden's been shrinking Trump's lead a bit recently, even with a 41% approval rating. Maybe Trump's been shrinking his own lead, rather. I don't know. Trump's only up a point or two on average now. In this Emerson poll from yesterday, Trump's up 1 point. In this economy YouGov poll, the race is tied in a dead heap. It's not good, folks. Trump should be beating the pants off Joe Biden, and he's up only by 1 point. Even in some of these swing states, Trump's lead has been shrinking, like North Carolina. In this Fox poll, he's up 5 now. He was up 7. Wisconsin, it's now tied. Trump and Biden are tied. Another state he really does need to win. Now, these polls are after his NATO comments last week. I don't know if that had any impact on this, but that's the thing, right? Trump doesn't have a filter. When he talks at his rallies, he's just off the cuff a lot of the time. He's fed by the crowd. When he says something and the crowd cheers, it amps him up even more to go harder. And that NATO comment's a good example the other day. Something he could have gone without saying. All that happens when he says things like that is the media picks it up. They run with it for 24 hours a day for a week straight, which is exactly what happened. In another story, President Biden spoke at the White House podium yesterday to implore Congress and the American people to pass the $96 billion aid package to fund Ukraine, using the death of Putin foe Alexei Navalny as fodder, saying, "I am outraged by the death of Alexei Navalny," saying Putin had him poisoned, had him arrested, had him prosecuted for fabricated crimes, sent to prison, put in isolation. But even in prison, Navalny was a voice for truth. Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. And then he goes on to explain why funding Ukraine's military, paying for all their weapons, keeping this war going is the best way to counter Vladimir Putin. Watch this.
Both not surprised and outraged by the news. Reported death of Alexei Navalny. He bravely stood up to the corruption, the violence, and all the bad things that the Putin government was doing. In response, Putin had him poisoned, he had him arrested, he had him prosecuted for fabricated crimes, he sentenced him to prison, he was held in isolation. Even all that didn't stop him from calling out Putin's lies. Even in prison, he was a powerful voice for the truth, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. And he could have lived safely in exile after the assassination attempt on him in 2020, which nearly killed him, I might add. But he was traveling outside the country at the time. Instead, he returned to Russia. Knowing he'd likely be imprisoned or even killed if he continued his work. But he did it anyway, because he believed so deeply in his country, in Russia. Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality. No one should be fooled, not in Russia, not at home, not anywhere in the world. Putin does not only target his citizens of other countries, as we've seen in what's going on in Ukraine right now, he also inflicts terrible crimes on his own people. This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes. You know, there was a bipartisan Senate vote that passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate to fund Ukraine. Now, as I've said before, and I mean this in a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching the House of Representatives. The failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten. It's going to go down in the pages of history. It really is. It's consequential. And the clock is ticking. And this has to happen. We have to help now. You know, we have to realize what we're dealing with Putin. All of us should reject the dangerous statements made by the previous president that invited Russia to invade our NATO allies if they weren't paying up. He said if an ally did not pay their dues, he'd encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit and not say what I'm really thinking, but let me be clear. This is an outrageous thing for a president to say. I can't fathom. From Truman on, they're rolling over in their graves hearing this.
But here's the thing, Alexei Navalny is like this mysterious guy. In Russia, he's not even a known figure. In the West, for some reason, he's propped up as a hero, but nobody really knows much about him. Obviously, it's terrible he died in prison, but using that as a reason, another reason why America should send $60 billion more to fund an unwinnable war, doesn't seem to cut the mustard with me. The death of one person doesn't justify the continued death of hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine and Russia. Not to mention, we do know for sure, by the way, that Alexei Navalny was working with Western intel. Definitely MI6, probably CIA when he was arrested. So saying Putin jailed his political rival, it's a bit misleading. If a U.S. citizen was caught on camera meeting with a CIA agent, caught on tape discussing how much it would cost to start a revolution in the United States, funded by a different country, I'm pretty sure he'd be arrested as well. Alright, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.